let's learn something about being human. I'm Rick Griggs, and I'm going to talk to you about the Mastery Circle Assessment tool. We've been working with this tool for about 30 years, and I want to tell you where it came from, how you can go through and do your own Mastery Circle. But first of all, if you're holding one of the diagrams, you've got one of the brochures with you, or you're watching this video to get some more detail, you probably came about it from a couple of different ways. You might have seen it as part of our Samsara Motivator System, that 40-line prose poem. It comes with the package. Or you may have seen it in one of our balanced mastery programs, kind of the core of our organization of the company, where we say, you want to combine being a balanced, well-rounded human being with being a high achiever that gets closer and closer to mastery, putting the two of those together. So either way you came about this Mastery Circle, we're going to give you some details today that will help you understand the process, help you understand the history, and get the best results possible. So let's go back a few years. I had just finished a book called Professional Balance, one of the first hardcovers on balance. And then I got a contract with a publisher in California to do this book called Quality at Work. We did the book, and it ended up backlisting, which means it kept selling for the publisher. In fact, for about 25 years, it kept moving in the bookstores, and it kept producing some royalties, which I was very happy about. But he came back to me and said, Rick, we're going to be doing a book on corporate wellness and then another one on personal wellness. And we'd like you to do the one on personal wellness. And I thought, darn it, I'd love to do the one on corporate wellness. That's a lot closer to my business. And he said, they'd already given that one away to another author. And I was still thrilled because it's the dream of an author to have a publisher come and say, we want you to do a book instead of begging for years and years. So I started working on the manuscript, and it was going pretty well. And I got close to finish. I turned it in, turned the draft in, and I said, Rick, it's just missing a little bit of something. We need something with a little more punch, a little more drive that'll really help people in their lives. So I took a trip, packed up all my writing gear. I drove down to Monterey, Carmel, California, and to do some really focused work on the manuscript. And you might know that's the stomping ground for John Steinbeck, the famous author that wrote The Grapes of Wrath, Of Mice and Men, The Pearl, Tortilla Flats. Well, Steinbeck comes away from that area. I think he grew up in Salinas. Comes back with a Nobel Prize from all that. And I come back with the Mastery Circle. So I'm happy with that, actually. So I added it to the book called Personal Wellness, and it worked out really well. In fact, a year or so later, the publisher sends me a packet, and he says, Rick, here's the French version of your book on personal wellness. And they call it Ménagez votre forme et votre santé. Sounds a little better in French, I know. But that worked really well. That was the initial kind of opening up of this Mastery Circle idea. So let's jump forward a little bit and show you what it's going to look like at the very end. Here's what we're working toward with all these details and instructions around this Mastery Circle. I pulled out one of mine from recently, kind of from the COVID era that happily we're getting through. So as you can see, I went around the circle and I kind of picked my top 5 priorities, and then I ended up doing some scoring and using a thick red line to connect my scores. So this is the end product of what we're going through today. Let me show you one more. I even went back about 10 years ago, and I found one that was representing my priorities at that time. And that's an important note. We're looking at your top priorities for this time of your life. So this one was, I won't list them all for you right now, but this was a list of my top 5 priorities. And I did the same thing. I did that little diagram with that thick red line. That'll mean more to you in just a little bit. So let's go through and talk about the actual assessment. This Mastery Circle Assessment, you've got a little booklet or brochure, and we tell people we want you to start on the back where the worksheet is. So you're going to go through and list your major priorities, your major goals, your major aspirations in life. You've got room for about 16 of those. I mean, we have to have you fill every single one of those, not necessarily. But there's room for a lot of priorities to start with. And then we want you to narrow it down to about 8. So you've got some semi-finalists so far. When you've got those, we want you to stop the process. And those of you who learned about this in conferences or seminars or retreats, it was a little bit of a surprise. We want you to stop and share your finalists with other people in the room, other people at the conference. If you're doing this alone, other people in your family or a neighbor. Something magical happens when you open up and make yourself vulnerable and you kind of divulge or disclose some of the things that are closest to your heart. Something happens when you share your semi-finalists with another human being. After that, we want you to go and narrow it down to your top 5. You also might want to start labeling, using 1 or 2 words to label that priority so that you don't have to write a full sentence on it. So once you've narrowed down to your top 5, you'll go to the inside of the brochure, going to the left side of the page. That's the blank diagram. You'll transfer your top 5 priorities into those 5 rectangles on the diagram. Now, just to make a point now, in about 6 to 8 weeks, we'd like you to redo this. And you've got a second diagram to redo your Mastery Circle process in 6 to 8 weeks or so. And you can change out priorities. If your life shifts, if your work shifts, or whatever, you can pick different priorities. Most people in 6 to 8 weeks, they've got the same 4, sometimes all 5. But if one kind of switches out, that's okay. That's normal. So how did we come up with this? How did we get these circles and boxes and rectangles? Let's go over to these 2 parallel horizontal lines. These are called your lower and upper control limits. So let's just take a couple of examples. For instance, if we're talking about tire pressure, you might be dealing with too little tire pressure, too much tire pressure, or just the right amount of tire pressure. It's in between the 2, the lower and the upper line. It's in spec. It's right where we want it. You can do this for hot chocolate. You could do this for dating and courting. You can be doing too little of what you need to be doing, a little too much, or right in the middle. Let's go back to the hot chocolate example and see if we can make sure we're clearing this up. You want hot chocolate to be at a good temperature where most people are going to enjoy it. That would be right in here. If the temperature of the hot chocolate is too cold, it's not gonna meet the lower control limit. It's gonna be on the bottom. If it's way too hot and scalding people, it's gonna be above the upper control limit. So what I want you to be thinking about as we go through the process is between the 2 lines is just right for your life, for your work, for your career, for that priority or those priorities. Now what we do, kind of going back to that trip to Carmel and Monterey, I took these 2 control limit lines and I made 2 concentric circles out of them. So going around the circles, anything in between those circles is going to be perfectly balanced by your standards. Where you want them to be is between or right next to those circles. So let's move over to the diagram where we've put in the 5 rectangles for your top 5 priorities. Okay? So taking the example of career as one of the top 5 priorities, you've got some numbers going outside of the circle and some numbers going inside. So a -1, a -2, or a -3 signify that you're underperforming, you're under-attending to that priority in your life. If you've got a +1, +2, or +3, you're doing too much as far as time, energy, or effort around that priority. So we're going to have you go around the circle and give yourself a score for each of those priorities you've listed and said, these are my top 5. So aren't they worthy of getting some scores? I hope you agree. So we're going to go around, and let's say we give this career a score of a +3. And we've got another priority, and we're going to give it a B, so I've just already circled that B. And the third priority might be a -3, right here. The fourth, we're saying, is going to be a +1, just a little too much, not bad, not a problem, just a little too much. And then the final, the fifth of our priorities, in our example, we're going to say this one gets a -2. So what we'll do after getting those scores, after being sure we've got the top 5 priorities for this time in our life, not the past, not the future, but for this time in our life, we're going to take they call it a chisel tip marker. It's one of these thick markers, and we want to connect the scores going around the circle. So we're just going around and connecting the scores. And that's a huge first step in our Mastery Circle Assessment. So what you've done, you've gotten your 5 priorities, you've given them some scores, and you've taken that red marker and connected your scores with a nice thick red line. And we get a diagram. Some of us are visual people, so as soon as we see that diagram, we've got it. You don't have to talk about any of the scoring or anything else. The visual people get this right away. I've seen it all over the world. I've seen the instant people see that diagram, something happens inside of them. It's like there's clarity plastered all over their faces. So it depends where you put the scores, but you get a diagram. Sometimes it looks like another country somewhere. Sometimes it looks like a pizza. But whatever the diagram comes out to look like, it's a representation of the priorities or the balance in your life. Now, we want to go a step further because a lot of people are not just visual people. A lot of people are quantitative. And it's very good to get both of these looks at the priorities in your life. So if we want to take our scores, and we're going to square the score against itself. So we're going to go kind of 1 times 1, 2 times 2, and 3 times 3. The significance here is that if we've got a negative number in there in our scoring, the squaring gets rid of the negative number, and it kind of spreads the score out. So 1 times 1 is going to be 1 anyway. 2 times 2 is going to be 4 points. And 3 times 3 is going to be 9. So over here, we've got our kind of, just like we started here, we've got our B's are 0 points. All the 1s, positive or negative, are going to be 1 point each. Every 2 you gave yourself is going to be 4 points each. And every 3, whether it's positive or negative inside the circle, it's going to be, you guessed it, 9 points each. So what we want to do is go around here and let's tally up our out of balance points. So we start with a +3. So that's going to give us 9 points. We move over to a B, so that's 0 points. We have a -3, positive or negative. It's still going to be 9 points. We move over here to our 1, that's a little overdone. 1 times 1 is still 1. It's 1 point, and a -2 is going to be 4 points. So if we do a little quick addition, we've got 9, 18, 19, we've got 23 out of balance points. So at this point, with your Mastery Circle Assessment, you've got two ways of looking at the totality of the priorities in your life. You've got that visual red diagram, and you've got your out of balance points. Both are useful when you start and as you work on your priorities. And I'll say right now, we've got a second video on Mastery Circle coaching and how do you go through these. The second video is more on what do you do after you've got your score, after you've got your diagram? How do you go about adjusting your life? These red lines are very hard to move. This score is difficult to move just by going about your daily routine. That's how you got there. This is the way you typically live life. And in that second video, I'll be talking about what do you do to kind of shave off some of those extreme scores and what not to do. What we don't want you to do is called jump to the B's. So let's say you've got, let's just use our anonymous item here. You've got a -3 on it. You haven't touched it, even though you say it's one of your top 5 priorities. A lot of people have the tendency of wanting to jump all the way to the B, to miraculously, it's like New Year's. You want to be an Arnold Schwarzenegger. You want to be physically fit. You want to be practically perfect, and it hurts to jump to the B's. You want to go gradually. You want to get that down to a -2, and then a -1, and finally a B, so that it doesn't disrupt all the other things in your life. So we're talking, in a way, we're talking about you don't want to be a one-hit wonder. A lot of people think that if they just focus on career, or if they just focus on writing that book, or tragically sometimes, we can just get our kid to be a concert pianist at 3 years old, and the kid does nothing else but just focuses on that one thing. That one-hit wonder lifestyle is kind of a dead end. And I've done a lot of research with my Balance Mastery program to back that up. We want to be well-rounded human beings. It'll support the thing we want most with a bunch of backup players. We've got a good bench, so to speak, on the thing that support the thing that we really cherish the most, the one that we want to get done the most. So it's counterintuitive to think that way, but by having your other 4, having a total of 5 priorities, it will help each one prosper and survive. So we've got our point score, we've got our visual. Let me ask you, what would be the maximum score on this assessment? So thinking for a second, maybe pause the video, do a little calculating, and you got it. The maximum score would be 45 points. The first time I ever saw an attendee get the 45 points was at a hospital in California many years ago, so not connecting it to anything current or recent. We did this with a group of people, and one woman came up with a score of 45. How do you get that? You have a 3 on every single item. In her case, she had a +3 on work, and she had -3s on family, social, exercise, and I believe it might have been finances. I don't remember exactly. But her other 4 items had -3s, even though they were top priorities. So I could tell she was very upset. I decided to give the class a break. So I let everybody go on break, and I kind of whispered to her, would you hang back just a little bit? And she did, and I gave her a blank form. I said, do you want to go ahead and redo this just to see if maybe we missed something? So she redoes her mastery circle, and it comes out to 45 points again, second time. So we chat a little bit, and then I let her take her break. And when she came back, she was a different person. When she came back, she almost had a smile on her face, from almost breaking down and crying to pretty much a calm smile. She says, Rick, I get it now. I understand. I just look at that red line and I see that the way I've been doing my work situation has been yanking everything else out of balance in my life. And I kind of knew it, but I didn't get the awareness until I looked at that diagram. And she said, for a while, I would get a bad feeling in my stomach on Sunday afternoon. And she's thinking about work the next morning. And she says, after a time, that feeling in my stomach started on Saturday. So I'd start to feel ill on Saturday, all day Sunday, because I was going to work on Monday. And we agreed, not a real good way to live. Now, I didn't have follow-up with her at the time, but I'm almost certain that she was able to shave a little off of one and start nourishing some of her other top priorities. You can only do that if you're aware. You can only do that if you see what's happening, if you kind of get a score and you can move forward. So as we begin to wrap this up, at this point you've got a visual, you've got a score, you've got something that we call your golden circle. If you can manage that golden circle, the other priorities of life get easier, they get smoother, they become even more effective as you kind of deal with them successfully. And that happens when you have your golden circle working well. So, you want to learn French? You want to build a koi pond? You want to learn piano? Put it in your circle. It'll get done. You want to go hiking in Belize? You want to go back to school? You want to go to Switzerland and taste some of those cheeses or fondues? Put it in your circle. If it's important, if you're thinking about retirement down the road, start now. Put something in your circle that'll kind of bear fruit when you need it the most. And that's your golden circle. So we'd suggest the way we like to do things is in person. We think humans crave personal contact. Now I know Mother Nature has thrown quite a wrench into that system in the recent past. But things will get better. Things have been getting better. And we'd like to have you imagine, take a staff meeting and have at one of your staff meetings, we bring in the Mastery Circle and watch your people blossom. You've got an annual retreat where your team's going away. What we do all over the world is take those retreats and plug in part of the time on doing the Mastery Circle for everyone. Maybe it's a corporate conference or your industry's annual meeting. We'd like to be there with you and take your people through this process. We do a lot of coaching, individual coaching, whether it's in person or remote, but any way we can, we'd like to support you in developing what we call a lifestyle worth living. So when you finish up, that hot chocolate is just perfect.